Hi, YouTube fans. Welcome back. This week, I'm launching a new segment, the Non-Profit Makeover. Every week, I pick a nonprofit I really like or I'd really like to work with and go through the steps that if I were a consultant or if I were getting ready for a strategy meeting with that client, these are the exact steps I would take to prepare for that meeting before I ever even had that first one-on-one with the client. So obviously some of the steps I take, they're one-sided. They're not, driven by feedback from the client, but it's just kind of my views, my opinions, what might be causing confusion for their users, their audience, and what are ways that might be some growth strategies we can explore together. So let's get started. Mathematical Association of America is this week's favorite nonprofit that I'm walking through. And my process, the 5 steps, is called Claim Your Brand. So clarity, leadership, audience, identity, and movement. And so I'll go through all 5 of those steps. And then I add a 6th bonus step, let's make some noise, according to my brand. How can we, if we were working together, how could we develop some programs that might creatively cause them to stand out, get noticed, grow their audience base so that they could then have more donors, more partners, more sponsors. So, the first step is clarity. Are you crystal clear on your mission, your vision, and most importantly, your impact? And not only are you clear about it as a nonprofit, but are you clearly articulating it in your marketing materials, your messaging, to drive more users, donors, subscribers, any audience target that you're potentially interested in targeting. So the Mathematical Association of America, their mission statement is to advance the understanding of mathematics and its impact on the world. And then it goes on to say, the Mathematical Association of America is the world's largest community of mathematicians, students, and enthusiasts. We further the understanding of our world through mathematics because mathematics drives society and shapes our lives. So I'm a big old math nerd. For those of you who don't know me, this is like right up my alley, which is why I've picked them to be my inaugural target. So then I'll take a look at the hero section, the top section of the website. Does that clearly state what you do, what impact you make? And so for Mathematical Association, you can see this beautiful graphic that says, we envision a society that values the power and beauty of mathematics. It's great. I probably would lean into impact, like we help X amount of students or educators, or we have a big audience, and do some kind of numbers to really more clearly articulate your impact as much as your vision. And for me personally, again, because I'm a big old math nerd, I would probably not highlight we envision a society that values. I would highlight power and beauty, because really, this is what the organization is doing, right? It's demonstrating the power and the beauty of mathematics. But it has a vision statement, has a very beautiful website. So really it scores thumbs up on that. No questions for me on that section. And here I've shown you a little bit of their strategic plans, beautiful plans, about 2-3 pages, very short, very concise, which is another thing I recommend for most nonprofits, because when they get these really complex plans, it's very difficult to pull all the elements together and have the project management required to make that happen. So they have very nice strategic plan. The only thing I'd recommend is it's a little light on tactics and it's really light on SMART goals, like by this date or this period or this time, we will have these things accomplished. So I would probably recommend that maybe they think about the actual tactics instead of sort of these visions of where they want to be in the future. And I downloaded this particular page because create an outreach plan that captures the essence of the existing sense of community while expanding it to engage expanded, diverse audience and enhance belonging. So what a mouthful. But yes, that's obviously what I'm hoping that this plan can help them articulate a little bit to further their particular strategic mission. So through the clarity element, my 2 main questions in terms of clarity that might be stumbling blocks for new users and new potential donors and new people using the site. Number 1 is, what do you actually do? And so yes, if you dive into all the pages, they have an annual conference called Math Fest. They have a fairly active blog of math articles. They have a very robust speaker schedule at Math Fest. They have a few other elements. So, I mean, it's if you dive into the site and look around, you can find that. But on the homepage, again, getting back to that impact where we help this many students and this many mathematicians connect over the love of mathematics, and kind of giving a little bit more of like what specifically you do, which is something that is going to make donors be more likely to donate. And then the second question along that lines is, if I donate to your site, where do the donations go? What does my money do to affect change? Like if I'm a big math fan, I'm not a student, I'm not a teacher, I just want to support the cause, where does my money go? And that a lot of donors now really want to feel the impact of their money. It goes towards scholarships, it goes towards education, it goes to XYZ. And so those would be the two questions I would have for the Mathematical Association of America. They were my client, like, how can we address that better? Or is there a reason why you're not addressing it? All right, then the next question is leadership. Does your website, does your nonprofit thoroughly demonstrate your position as a leader in the industry? And I would say that the Mathematical Association of America, I think it fails a little bit in this area. This would be an area that I would really work with them on a little bit more. First of all, there's no team profiles, leadership bios, leadership names, none of that. And, really when we're seeing these days that people are following people, they're following people more than they're following the companies they're associated with. So building a bit of a relationship with the people who are running the Mathematical Association. The other thing is they have this amazing body of professors and students that are talking about all the things that are happening in the world of mathematics. And you can find that material, but it isn't well defined from the homepage. You kind of have to poke around a lot to find it. And so if you're in a rush and if you're looking for something specifically, you might not spend the time that I spent kind of looking around to find all of that. And then they do have, as I mentioned, blog articles. I would probably optimize some of those articles a little bit more for search, add some of the SEO and HTML tags, but also make sure that the titles feel very much like professors wrote the articles, and they aren't necessarily written to target the search engines. And I don't know that they're necessarily written very well to target users. So I'm not quite clear on who the articles are targeting, and if there's a direct plan for this is this audience, this is that audience, and these are the articles we're going to write to affect change for those audiences. So that's going to be a little bit more in the next section. So I don't know that the leadership part of that completely. The other thing is on the articles, it doesn't define who the writer is in context or relationship to the Mathematical Association of America. So I would see them doing a little bit more about celebrating their leadership, their thought knowledge, and really the leadership of Americans in mathematics in general. I think that's another area of growth that I would put on my talking points list with them. And the other thing is really another question I have is they seem to be a little bit underrepresented in the media and creating some kind of a strategy. There's every time someone talks about not liking math or whatever, that there's experts that the Mathematical Association can provide to the media to say that is false, that is incorrect. Let me connect you with a professor or a student or a staffer or our board or someone to really, obviously create awareness for the organization, but also then kind of create awareness for that power and beauty of mathematics that they're doing. So really diving into the press releases and the ability for people to speak on topics if the media needs that. So just in general, the overall authority of the industry, I think that would be something would be high on my client talking point list. And then the other question I would have regarding authority is the blog is hosted in a completely separate URL, so things link off there, but any SEO that they might be driving from the blog isn't necessarily feeding back into the main site. And what's more, there's also a lot of publications, but all the publications, if you want, there's one that's available to the public and the other is sort of membership driven, but the one that's available to the public, the articles from that magazine are in a flip magazine style. So certainly that can be indexed in search, but people don't like to read those. So what would be the resources required to possibly physically translate all of those articles into literal blog posts or literal articles to A, enhance SEO, and B, give people a better understanding. And then similarly doing the same thing, why is that not happening with some of these high level topics that the mathematicians are talking about at Math Fest? So that would be another question that would be on my client prep list. And then the other thing, and this is probably something that's a derivative of just doing the site redesign, but there are a fair amount of dead links that shouldn't be. Like there's an area where it's like, look at our archive from MathFest, and there's no link on there at all. And so it's probably something that's still in progress, but really kind of doing a review of, either taking off those things that don't have links or taking off those things that aren't going where they're supposed to do, or just kind of, doing a review page by page of making sure just mechanically everything is doing what it's supposed to do. So, all right. So the next section is audience. Are you paying attention to what your audience needs and what your audience wants? And are you aligning that with your mission and your goals and your impact? And so I think the Mathematical Association does a really great job of doing that. And so like on their homepage, right under their hero section, the power and beauty of mathematics, there's literally 3 boxes, here they are, that take you to faculty, student, or industry professional. So literally, if you're on the site, you don't know what they do, and you're an industry professional, you're a faculty member, so you already know where you have to go. So I think that does a really good job. But I think then when you take that next step, things don't always link off to where they should be going in a completely integrated pattern. So like if you're a student and you want to learn XYZ, well, there's some great content on YouTube that never appears on the if you're a student page. If you're an industry professional, so the site in general could still use a little bit more integration to get the audience members to where they want to go. But that's a small thing. My biggest thing is that I think is room for growth. And this may be something they've already discussed and discarded, but in your mission statement, you talk about math enthusiasts, but the website really has no resources at all. So like me as a math fanatic, there's nothing for me. Now I got my degree in mathematics in university. So, I'm advanced-ish in math. I understand a lot of what is on the site, but even still, I really had to kind of poke around to find things. And I think there's a lot of ways that you could integrate more love of math, if you love math, here are some really cool things to check out. All right, the next section is identity. Do you have a compelling visual identity, logo, fonts, brand colors? As I mentioned, they do have brand guidelines floating around somewhere, so they've defined that well. And the site is very beautiful. It's very clean. But identity also talks about language and how you're going to talk to your audience. So, my first 2 questions would be on talking points with the client would be, why did you remove your brand guidelines? Was that a conscious decision? Are you redoing them? Or did they just accidentally fall off when you redesigned the site? Like, where'd they go? And then the other question I have is on the homepage, on the vision statement, celebrating the power and beauty of mathematics. I'm not sure the website does enough to celebrate the beauty of mathematics. There's pie art, there's Fibonacci art, there's data visualizations. There are all kinds of ways to demonstrate how beautiful math can be in art, in music, in song. And I realize, there may not be the resources to do that, but because you've put celebrating the beauty of mathematics in your vision statement, that would really be another area where I would talk about, like how would the Mathematical Association of America be able to integrate more of the beauty of mathematics, the pie art, the Fibonacci sequence art, into their messaging, into their content, and really creating that element that they've defined in their messaging. So here, this is from what I've downloaded in the past. It is not currently on the site. So it may no longer be their current brand guidelines, or like I said, they may be redoing it, but their brand guidelines have really a beautiful outline of how math and how people should talk about math. I'm going to highlight in, focus in on that. So always do relate daily things to math. Make math enjoyable and inclusive. Listen and make sure members, audience feel like their thoughts are heard. Be creative, try new things, et cetera, et cetera. And I don't know that the new website language necessarily follows these brand guidelines. But again, not knowing why the brand guidelines are no longer up there, it could be possible they're redoing that. But I like these guidelines. I love that people have defined this, like tell human interest stories about math, which I think is another growth area for the Mathematical Association, is just talking about how we use math every single day. So, and again, here's the blog, visually, it's not on the main MAA .org site. It's on the blog site, so it is not 100% within the branding, but the state of IBL is the title. The subtitle is not actually about IBL. It's about that they've relaunched the blog timing, IBL, which is industry-based learning. It's a low. I Googled SEMrush for I searched SEMrush for IBL. It has a fairly low competitive rate, so they could probably rank fairly high on that term, but without sort of optimizing this blog post for search. Like this post could be doing more for them. But also, I think it's very dense. It's clearly written by a professor of mathematics. And I don't know that, again, it aligns back with the brand guidelines, which is sort of human interest stories and sort of making it approachable and accessible for a wider audience. And that may not be the purpose, and that's okay. But I think if it's not the purpose, that's fine. But maybe having more blog articles that are also talking about cool stuff in mathematics that's happening and not these very, very dense professor related articles only. All right. And then finally, obviously, as a nonprofit, as any business really today, we're in the business of creating movements, right? We're competing in the attention economy. We're competing for the currency that's called economy. And the best way to get that attention is to build a movement so people can speak on our behalf, talk about us, share stories about us. I think the Mathematical Association of America does a fairly good job. They have great social numbers. I mean, their LinkedIn is 21,000, X is 108,000 followers, YouTube has 53,000 followers. So I think they've done a fairly good job of creating a movement. I think they've done a fairly good job, generally speaking, of content on their social platforms. The only thing I think is the content feels disjointed. It feels very much like one content person created the YouTube content schedule, another person created the Facebook content schedule, and that maybe not everything is entirely aligned, and maybe not some of the cool stuff on YouTube, which has a lot of original content, is coming back to be on the site of maa.org. So people come to the site first and YouTube second can find that content even if they're not on YouTube. So a little bit more alignment, but overall they've done a fairly good job of creating a movement. My top questions for them would be, one of the things that they have, which I'm very excited about to dive into with them, my question would be, they have what's called special interest groups for the Mathematical Association of America. So special interest groups, SIG, so sigmas. And then what happens is they have them kind of located throughout the site. If you'd like to join this special interest group or this regional group, click here. But when you click to the sigmas, those are clearly organized. Those websites are clearly organized by volunteers or chapter leaders. They don't match the brand guidelines at all. I popped up one here. You can see that some of them have copyright dates from 2021. They have outdated events that, are past a year old. And so this is a very powerful way to kind of build this message regionally and locally and, create advocates out in the field. And why is that? Maybe it's still coming. Maybe that's phase 2 of their web design, but why have they not provided the chapters some tools to help them align better so that when you go on that site, you don't kind of think like, wow, is this like MAA is so beautifully defined between its maybe brand guidelines and its web design. And then to kind of have these, these sites that just don't feel aligned. So that'd be my first question is like, why are they being underutilized? And is there a way to bring them into the story more to build your advocacy, your movement? And then, as I mentioned, is your social media content integrated? Is it following one master plan? So that the YouTube channel is being cross-promoted on Facebook, it's being cross-promoted on LinkedIn. And are there ways to kind of grow some of those engagements across all platforms? And then the other thing, and I think this would be really a room for growth, is the general public has become hugely fascinated with data visualizations. And we are, sites like Visual Capitalist, which are doing such a great job right now of really talking about news in numbers. Like here, I posted the math behind social distancing. And I just can't imagine there wouldn't be some way for MAA and Visual Capitalist to integrate. And there's other visualization sites. There are tools that do visualizations. Business intelligence is what they call it. And that it feels like that might be a movement the MAA could sort of grow into and adopt. So that would be a question to like, is that something that's been on the list? Is that something you might be considering? So again, I mean, really all of this is great stuff. It's just sort of ideas of like, now what's the next stage? What does our future content plan look like? And how can we inspire some growth? And then finally, the last thing I would do with any client is I always recommend my clients figure out a way to make some noise. That's my brand statement. And it's just, again, you've got to be heard in the attention economy. And so what are some ways that you might be able to get the word out? And so, for example, you see I do, I guess, because I'm a math nerd, but all the time on Facebook, that Facebook math question of, what's the correct answer? And nobody does, the parambus, nobody does 0 times 0 first. And so the answer is 0, not 59. Like having math experts talk about that, and where there's a page on them, kind of like a Snopes, debunk this question, and having sort of more connection with that Facebook question and offering some resources for all the 9,000 people who are arguing over this question with absolute certainty that they're right when they are not. Another way that might be a way to reach out for the Mathematical Association is creating just sort of cute little explainer social media posts. Like you could do hey, are you late for work? Do you have time for coffee? And then at the very bottom, like, see, you do use math every day, and kind of just creating a little bit of that debunking that myth that math isn't used, but doing it in a way that isn't going to professors. It isn't going to potential students. It's going to the everyday people like myself who love math, but maybe aren't convinced of your benefit to my pocketbook, for example. And then finally, a strategy that might be, I think, something that could really be amazing is creating a master list of all the amazing mathematicians in the US. And, when we think of mathematicians, we think of Pythagoras, we think of Euler, we think of Fibonacci, right? We think of these great European, most people probably don't think of mathematicians, but when I do. So creating a list of the amazing American mathematicians and what they've, solved for and what they've created and discovered and are working on, so that, again, when the media talks about famous mathematicians, they have some point of reference of what current modern day mathematics looks like, and how mathematicians like the women from Hidden Figures contributed to American history. And so it's not just a cold, not unrelatable topic. So I think that would be the other potential growth area. All right, so if you've been following along, then I would build a little bit of a strategy. Number 1, defining the tactics and SMART goals specifically from the strategic plan. Then number 2, I have a tool that I call the audience value matrix, where I define every audience, jointly with my clients, I define every audience member, what their goals and values are, and what content plan could happen, and strategically to bring them to where you want them to go. Go to the conference, donate, subscribe to the newsletter. I'd create a donor stewardship matrix. How often are you communicating with your donors? Are you thanking them? How's the newsletter going? I would do, and then just kind of evaluate all content. What's working? Is it integrated? How can we integrate more through all the sites, social media sites, the blog site, the Sigma sites, and kind of create this thriving ecosystem across all touch points. And then, evaluate the current content calendar. How is that working? Is it one person project managing the whole thing, or is it just shot off to various people? And then building this content calendar that lays into motion all of these other items. And then really, again, as I mentioned, emphasize leadership and emphasize growth of, here are some new audiences we could possibly target by getting a little bit more, having people get a little bit more. And then finally, emphasizing leadership, talking about the great leaders in the organization and the American mathematicians, and then really focusing more on enthusiasts and seeing how you can bring them into the conversation as well and develop math quizzes and puzzles and whatever else for the website. So that's it. If you'd like to get notifications of future makeovers, click the little subscribe and bell below, or head to my website, monicapoling.com, and subscribe for my newsletter, Let's Make Some Noise. And if you're a big old math nerd like I am and you'd like to make a donation, I've also put the Donate Now link for the Mathematical Association of America below.